Welcome to Saddleback's video series. Saddleback is your #1 resource for your reluctant and striving learners. Be sure to follow Saddleback across its social media platforms. And I'm Holly Sawyer, a secondary ESL teacher out of Chesapeake, Virginia. When I first began teaching, I had limited to no resources, but I can honestly share it was one of the best things that has happened for my teaching practice. Thank you for joining me for today's topic. Let's build a unit with me. When we remember some of the good old days of teaching, we often remember how the units were theme related. And truly, I find this one of the best ways to introduce language to my students so that it connects and it builds across multiple parts of their brains. When I construct a unit, it's always going to be around a central text. They may range from the language for science, the language for social studies, the language for language arts, but the text is going to be key and everything stems from there. When I'm searching for a text, I will often go to Saddleback's rich catalog of resources, or I will select a nonfiction article often from Scholastic Action. Their magazine is absolutely amazing. I may choose an article from Newsella, but I'm not afraid of engaging some classic literature as well. Some poems, songs, there's a variety of things you could choose. I've also used adapted text, and with AI nowadays, you can easily adapt by running it through, say, Diffit or Magic AI. Now, one of my recommendations for selecting the text is to select something that you would find that is relevant and needed across the curriculum for your students, but also one that interests you, because if you are excited about a text and you find it engaging, then that will transfer over to your students and they will appreciate your enthusiasm and they will catch on to that. So for example, recently, in my last unit of study, I selected the article Spy of the American Revolution, put out by Scholastic Action. And I printed off some of their supplementary materials, but I began my unit with background building. And I would advise this: do not skimp on background building. This is one of the most key things that our students need. And this is where we can often connect across the curriculum, but also embed some study skills. So I began our unit by teaching my students how to take a sketch note as we watch the video. A video is a great way to teach our students how to sketch note because of its visual medium. And so we watched the video on background of the American Revolution and paused at different points where I showed them how I would take a note, I would draw and then write down some key words, etc. Talk out loud, modeling my thought processes to my students. What should I draw here? I would look at the screen that was paused in order to give myself some ideas of what was important and what was key. And then eventually, as we made our way through the video, I would pause the video and allow my students to continue on and to demonstrate to me that they understood how to take notes on their own independently, that gradual release of responsibility. So if we are about to read an article, we review and we identify what the text features are in the article. It is absolutely essential for our students to be able to navigate the articles, to identify where information would be quickly, and to become accustomed to how articles are organized so that when they go to those end of course exams, when they're trying to identify where the information is located in the article, they can find it easily enough without having to reread from beginning to end. Quizlet is absolutely a great way to house your vocabulary and also to keep it for your students so that they can go back and practice on their own independently or when you may not be with them. Then I will quickly import that vocabulary set into Blokit, which is also a wonderful site in which you can easily create an interactive game. They have an import feature for Quizlet, and so I will import, it takes seconds. I will import the vocabulary list that I have created in Quizlet over to Blukit so that we can start day 3 with a review game of the vocabulary that we have discussed as well. So day 2-ish or 3, we have identified the text features, we've listed them out, we've explored them in the article we haven't even read yet. Often we won't even read the article until day 3 or day 4. When we read the article, we are well prepared. We've learned our background knowledge, we've learned our vocabulary and this overall structure of the text. And then we are happy to jump in with 2 feet to read the article together. Now, every day I have been beginning recently to show my students a picture from those text features, and then we identify the things that we know, the things that we recognize, we label them in the picture, and then I have my students record a 45-second to 1 minute response to what they see. We're basically following the PWIM model here, and that's the picture word inductive model. So my students see the image, we've written out the vocabulary, and then they're expected to use that vocabulary to discuss what they've seen in that short recording. Now, I use Vocaroo, but you can also use Canvas or a lot of other learning management systems will have a recording feature, and I find this to be great speaking practice for my students who are preparing for their yearly annual language proficiency assessment. When we finally read the article, like I mentioned, they are so ready to read. We will echo read or choral read, where they repeat each phrase after I read it first. And I find this really to be great for my beginners and early intermediates. Often they're intimidated to read out loud on their own, and they will wonder, oh, am I saying this correctly? But when I model for them each phrase first, and then they repeat after, they feel emboldened, they feel confident, been taught how to read that phrase, and then they will repeat it after me. Then after we've read it, the article through fully together as a class, then I will have them reread the article in pairs, and I'll walk around the way that I get my students to do this, because at first some would do it and some would not, but I walk around with a clipboard and I write a mark if they are doing the task, and I will give them a little participation grade in order to ensure that they're trying. And I tell my students, what I want you to do here is I want you to try to read. I want you to try the word. You don't have to know everything perfectly. Making mistakes is a part of the process of learning a language. So please do make mistakes here. After reading once or twice, I will often have them answer comprehension questions, and we'll chunk it a little bit more at that point. I will teach my students how to answer those comprehension questions. And often a strategy that I will use for my students at that point is the sentence mirroring strategy. We look carefully at the question, what is it asking? And then we will highlight the words in the question that are key in one color, for example, pink. And then we will begin our answer with those pink words so that it reduces my students' dependency on sentence starters. But I also like it because it makes them spend a little bit more time with the question. They have to understand truly what the question is when they're creating their own sentence starter themselves. Then at that point, they turn to the text, they take a different highlighter, and they identify the answer based on the words that they had highlighted. They transfer that information over into the next, into their answer, and then they finish their response. And then I tell my students, reread your response to out loud, to hear it, and to see if it makes sense to you. Next, what I did with my students is I took them to another text where they saw the same story about that spy of the American Revolution, James Armistead Lafayette. I took them to a text that Saddleback has recently put out, the Story of America series, and there was a feature in their colonial book on him, and I think that it did a lot for my students. One, they were already familiar with the story, and so when they saw the story a second time, they felt confident, they felt engaged, they felt successful in reading that second article on the same topic. Two, it also provided them those practice opportunities that are often missing. One thing that I love in my English language development class is that we can engage in the content and through several different sources in order to practice simply and have additional exposure to the language that we're learning. I always end my units with a project-based learning experience. Now, I've used quite a number of different projects over the years with my different types of units. One, for example, has been to conduct a survey, to create a survey question and to ask people and to sort of within the building the question. I find that to be a very successful project, especially for my beginners, because they repeat the same type of question again and again and again with others. I've also had my students create an infographic, which has been highly successful. I've had them research an article where they've had to write their own text features for the information that they've gathered. I've had them of course, create traditional presentations. I've had them create video games and taught them how to code and create coding products. But I've also, in this class, I taught my students how to make a video through WeVideo, but also that other applications could be used, such as Canva, etc., if you're interested in teaching your students how to make a video. So their task was to create a video on a historical figure of their choice. And so my students quickly, what we did is we researched an encyclopedia article on the person that they chose, and we printed it off. We had time for them to highlight some of the key information in their articles. I gave them a series of questions that they were to all follow. First off, simply, who is the historical figure? When and where were they born? What are they best known for? What challenges did they face? When did they die? Are they still living? And have they been honored in any particular way? And then once they had gathered their information, I taught them the website WeVideo, and that is one of my big pieces of advice if you're to teach your students how and give them a project-based learning experience. Make sure to teach the technology or to teach how to create their project, because for many it will be the first time they've ever engaged in this type of project, as we're constantly getting new students in at different points with varied backgrounds. So take the time to teach the technology, teach the language of the technology, model how to do the assignment, have frequent pauses and check-ins. How far along are they? What kind of questions do you have? Rotate amongst your students, have them come by and check in with you so that they feel confident and successful about the expectations of the project. For my students, they all chose their historical figures, and then they completed their projects, and they felt so successful, and it was incredible to see them work. funny enough, I had a couple of students say, Miss Sawyer, why don't you just give us tests? Because we don't have to work as much. We just answer and we're done. And I just started laughing because they were teasing me. I've had them for a long time. I said, yeah, we gotta work. We gotta demonstrate what we've learned and work with the language and the content that we've been learning together. And okay. But at the end, for this particular unit, because it was a video, we had a film fest and we watched all of the students' videos together. And at that point, they all knew the general language because they were all answering the same questions, but with the different historical figures that they chose. And they all got a wide breadth of different historical figures throughout history. But that's how I construct my units. We begin with the text. Then I begin with the text in identifying what we're going to discuss and focus on. And then I work backwards to build the background knowledge. Then we engage in the vocabulary. In the text features, we read the text, supplement the text, and then finalize our unit with a project, which I will also teach how to do. I find this to be incredibly successful with my students. Each unit will approximately last, like I mentioned, 2 to 3 weeks. I think that it's great for my students to functionally use their language through these projects in order to not just feel successful, but to also learn these kinds of skills, which they will need in all of their classes, that it helps prepare them for the workforce, because they are going to be going into the workforce and nobody's going to sit them down and ask them, how well do you do on multiple choice exams? Thank you for joining me today. I hope that I've given you some ideas. My recommendation for you as you enter into your classroom tomorrow is to identify one text that you are excited about and where it will fit in your year. And then once you have that one text in your mind, you can move backwards and forwards from there.